1992. A routine laboratory test on a 3,000-year-old Egyptian mummy triggers global panic. Inside the hair of the priestess Henut Taui, scientists discover cocaine and nicotine, plants said to exist only in ancient America. If this impossible chemistry is real, everything we know about ancient trade and the boundaries of our own history just collapsed. What else have we missed? In 1960, a team of Norwegian archaeologists unearthed something that rewrote the boundaries of the ancient world. On the windswept tip of Newfoundland, at a site called Lance aux Meadows, they found the unmistakable remains of Norse longhouses, timber frames, iron nails, and hearths packed with charcoal. Radiocarbon dating placed the settlement at around the year 1000 CE. For centuries, sagas about Viking journeys across a vast western ocean had been dismissed as myth. Now, with these charred timbers and forged rivets in hand, the evidence was undeniable. Norse explorers had crossed the Atlantic nearly 500 years before Columbus. The discovery forced a rewrite of world history textbooks. Suddenly, the idea that ancient people could reach across us oceans was not fantasy but fact. Scholars who once scoffed at the possibility now mapped out Viking sea routes and reconstructed clinker-built ships. What was once considered a wild tale became a new baseline for what ancient navigation could achieve. The story of Lance aux Meadows stands as a reminder that when hard evidence surfaces, timber, iron and hearths can cause paradigms to collapse overnight. Yet even as this Norse outpost became a symbol of open-minded scholarship, most believed it set the absolute limit of pre-Columbian contact. The Atlantic, for all its storms and distance, was seen as a one-time exception, not a highway. But history has a way of hiding its boldest truths in plain sight, waiting for the next piece of evidence to surface. In 1992, inside a forensic laboratory in Ulm, Germany, Svetlana Balabanova prepared to run a standard toxicology screen on a 3,000-year-old Egyptian mummy. The subject was Henut Taui, a priestess whose remains had travelled from ancient Thebes to a modern collection. The procedure was routine. Hair and tissue samples were carefully clipped, solvents extracted the organic compounds, and the vials were loaded into the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, GCMS. The same technology used in modern crime labs to catch drug users. The machine's readout, expected to be blank or at most a faint trace of ancient herbs, instead spiked with unmistakable signals: cocaine, nicotine, hashish. The numbers were not marginal. Nicotine levels reached 900 nanograms per gram in hair, cocaine measured at 24 nanograms per gram, and in the priestess's stomach the cocaine concentration soared to 646 nanograms per gram. Balabanova's first thought was contamination. She re-extracted, retested, and ran controls. The results held. Every verification step, every blank, every control sample came back clean, except for the mummy's own tissues. The data refused to disappear. These were not surface residues. The compounds were embedded deep within the ancient biological material. In that moment, a quiet laboratory became the epicenter of an archaeological earthquake. The evidence pointed to a reality that should have been impossible. A woman who died 3 millennia ago in Egypt had somehow ingested substances that, by every textbook, grew only in the distant Americas. The question was no longer whether the results were real, but how such a connection could exist at all. Cocaine and tobacco are not just rare plants, they are botanical outlier. Locked to a single continent. In the world of ancient Egypt, every known medicinal herb, every ritual incense, could be traced to Africa, Asia, or the Mediterranean. But Erythroxylum coca, the source of cocaine, grows only on the slopes of the Andes. Nicotiana tabacum, the main tobacco species, is native to the rainforests and river valleys of the Americas. Not a single wild population of these plants has ever been documented in Africa, Europe, or Asia before the late 1400s. In 1000 BCE, when Henut Taui lived and died, the Atlantic Ocean was considered an impassable divide. The official story holds that tobacco and coca only arrived in the Old World after Columbus's ships returned from the Caribbean. Yet the chemical signatures locked inside a priestess's body tell a different story. These are not distant cousins or lookalikes. the molecular fingerprints match the very species found in South America. No ancient text, no tomb painting, no archaeological dig in Egypt has ever described or depicted these plants. Their absence is as loud as their presence in the lab results. The contradiction is absolute. How can a priestess from Thebes, never known to leave the Nile, end up with the chemical residue of plants that supposedly did not exist in her world? The paradox is not just academic, it is a direct collision between what science can measure and what history claims is possible. The implications reach far beyond a single mummy or a single test. They threaten to upend the map of the ancient world itself. Within days of Balabanova's announcement, the academic backlash was swift and public. Museum curators and Egyptologists pointed to the long, winding journey these mummies had taken from their tombs to European collections. They argued that 19th century collectors, often heavy smokers themselves, might have contaminated the bodies, either through direct handling or through the use of tobacco-based insecticides. Some critics suggested that the chemicals detected could have seeped in during centuries of storage, passing from museum air into ancient tissues. The official explanation hinged on the idea that what Balabanova's instruments found was nothing more than a modern stain on ancient remains, but the forensic evidence cut through these objections with clinical precision. The gas chromatography mass spectrometry analysis did not just pick up traces on the surface, it found nicotine and cocaine metabolites locked deep inside hair shafts and embedded in stomach and lung tissues. These molecules were not loosely attached. They were chemically integrated, evidence of metabolism during life, not accidental exposure after death. Washing the hair and tissues with solvents failed to remove the signals. In controlled experiments, only living ingestion could account for metabolites like cotinine and benzoylexgonin appearing in such concentrations in such locations. Alternative theories surfaced, including the suggestion of Nicotiana africana, a rare African tobacco species with high nicotine content. Yet no wild population of this plant has ever been documented in Egypt, and the chemical signatures still matched New World species. Balabanova's team published their full methodology and raw data in peer-reviewed journals, inviting scrutiny. No evidence of research suppression appeared. Instead, the findings remained open to challenge. Grounded in protocols that withstood forensic standards, the data refused to be dismissed. At this point, the question was not contamination, but the scale of the anomaly waiting to be explained. 9 Egyptian mummies, all from elite tombs and dated to the 1st millennium BCE, underwent the same forensic scrutiny as Henut Taui. Toxicologists Michael Pasha and Andreas Nerlich found the pattern repeated, nicotine and cocaine embedded deep within hair, bone and lung tissue. The results were not isolated to a single body or museum, but surfaced again and again across collections. Each new positive test chipped away at the idea of a one-off fluke or accidental contamination. Meanwhile, explorer Thor Heyerdahl set out to answer the question of ancient maritime capability. In 1970, his Ra-2 expeditions sailed a papyrus reed boat from Morocco to Barbados, covering 3,270 nautical miles in just 57 days. The voyage proved that the materials and techniques available to ancient Egyptians could survive the Atlantic. The chemistry and the seafaring both pointed in the same direction. The impossible began to look plausible. Compound-specific isotope analysis now offers a forensic roadmap through the chemical maze. By measuring carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen isotopes, delta-13C, delta-15N, and delta-2H in alkaloids such as nicotine and cocaine, scientists can trace the biological origins of these molecules with striking precision. The process demands careful extraction from ancient hair or stomach tissue, followed by calibration against reference standards to rule out modern contamination. Even with the technology ready, a wall remains. Most museums tightly restrict destructive sampling, especially of elite mummies. Ethical guidelines require that every milligram of hair or tissue removed must be justified, approved and sometimes fought for over years. The tools exist, the evidence is waiting, but the gatekeepers of the past hold the keys. If permissions are granted, isotope fingerprints could finally solve the riddle. Was the priestess's last breath laced with the air of the Andes? Or does another explanation still hide in the shadows? The question lingers, suspended between what science can prove and what history is willing to accept. Right now, every strand of ancient hair holds evidence that rewrites global history. As new labs revisit the data, the wall between continents looks thinner than ever. The real frontier isn't the ocean, it's our willingness to follow the science, wherever it leads. What do you think?